Oh, Ryan, you're in listen only mode. Get back in here. Hey, Facebook.
Let me see if I can fix them.
This is my first Facebook Live. Judge gently. Although, if you are judging the beard, how dare you? If you know me pre-beard, let's just cover some basic housekeeping. This is a bear market hair that we're growing on our face, and the hair will go down until the Dow goes up. That's how we're working this right now. So you can you can gauge the health of your 401k by my facial hair. You're welcome. This is a public service I offer.
Sorry, Steve. We're trying to figure out what happened to Ryan's audio. Just one sec.
That's all right. I'll sing to you guys while we wait. You hear that? I've been working my way back to you, babe. I'm not actually going to sing to you the whole time. But I will tell you, of all the webinars you've ever joined, on a scale from 1 to super serious, this will probably be somewhere around 2. Hopefully we're just gonna have a little bit of fun, listen to some music. If we learn one thing, we've accomplished our mission. If we smile twice, we've exceeded our kicking range. We have really done it. Hold on a second. I was gonna have my my coworkers join us. Let me call them real quick. They're more likable than I am. It looks like, is somebody messaging me? All right. Well, if you're messaging me, I can't see it. Just a second, guys.
Okay, guys, we have
Ryan
Ryan working on logging in. We're so sorry about this. It was very weird. As soon as we hit play, it kicked him out. Thank you so much for being here with us today. As always, you've already been introduced to Steve and his beard. For I'm Gonna Make You Love Me, what Motown knew about working with hiring managers. So this is really,
Come here, bud.
we really need a break for a little bit of fun, right? He has put together this fantastic playlist to take you through and walk you through what the 6 principles of persuasion.
The 6 authoritative hits on persuasion.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. Zipping.
I hate to start, with a nit, but could you guys see? That's my coworker. That's my coworker Leland. Here, come here real quick, bud, and then you have to leave.
So
Come here.
Steve is actually on Facebook Live right now too.
Yeah. Say hi.
Check him out there.
So
do you
on the
want
other
to share
side
your
of the
screen here also? Your camera?
Share my screen?
Yeah,
I'll share my
we
camera.
can
How do
see
I
your
do
slide
that?
deck, but we can't see your camera. It's
All right, what
in
do I click?
show screen up there
Show
at the very top.
screen.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, you just gotta buckle up for this one. Webcam.
I think everyone across the globe is learning going through this right now. There you go.
If you're feeling serious right now, you might want to go take a walk and give this one a pass. All right, wait. Can you see me?
Are.
All right.
Yes.
This is Beardy and this is Leland. We love Leland. Beardy is my quarantine protest beard. Wave. You can't see them, but they can see you. Okay. All right, wave.
Hi, Leland.
All right, now go. Everybody says hi. They say that you're adorable and that you look like a superhero. What superhero are you right now?
Squirtle.
You're a Squirtle? Good choice. All right, go back to mommy.
That is the best superhero. Okay, let's get going. I think Ryan is locked out for good. So you want to move on to the next slide and I'll take us through housekeeping.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, everybody. As always, you are in listen only mode. That means that you can hear us, but we can't hear you. Please, however, do not be shy. Don't let that stop you from asking questions. Just use the questions panel in your sidebar to send anything over to Steve, and I will relay. We will interrupt him as annoyingly as possible throughout the whole webinar, so don't be
Don't
shy. Share.
don't you dare.
Now it's a challenge, so it's going to happen. We are also live. Please use the R Daily hashtag to share all over social media. Go find that Facebook Live post and share it with your friends. And we are recording. You will receive a copy of this slide deck and the recording after the webinar. Please keep an eye on your inbox. That will come directly from info@recruitingdaily.com. And I'm done. I'm shutting up. It is all yours, Steve. Send your questions.
That sounds so official. All right, guys, send through your questions now. What do you got? All right. Today, we are covering the much anticipated, long awaited, can't believe it's not on pay-per-view, authoritative hits for recruiters on influencing hiring managers. So some of you guys logged in may know me. Some of you, most of you don't. Nice to meet you. My name is Steve O'Brien. The handsome young man that you saw is my son. He is a quarter of the best thing about my family. The other quarter is my daughter, Grace. I'm coming to you live from Raleigh, North Carolina. It's really great to meet you guys. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about influence, but in all seriousness, it's probably not going to be that serious. There's a couple things that are the output of research, the result of smart people doing studies that we may be able to apply and figure out how to build deeper and more influential relationships with hiring managers. But we're also going to listen to music, and we're also hopefully going to laugh a little bit. I did write a parody for you guys. I'm a very gifted singer. Before I decided to go into recruiting, I did toy with Broadway. Turns out that didn't work out. So since Broadway didn't work out, I've been in recruiting for about 20 years. You know what? Let me introduce my wife as well. My wife is Alicia. She's the one that gave me those two beautiful kids, Grace and Leland. She is currently in quarantine mode trying to keep her stuff together, I'll say, for the young listening ears. So I got into recruiting about 20 years ago. I still tend to introduce myself as a recruiter. I think that it was one of the most unexpected blessings that sort of wandered into my life. I did an undergraduate degree in philosophy, made my father very proud with that choice. I was actually planning to go to law school. Everything was working well until I met a girl that was better looking than I deserved, and I threw all of my future plans away to chase her. I dropped out of law school and pursued her. Now, she's my wife and the mother of my kids, so it all worked out okay. On the recruiting side, I've worked on agency probably for about 5 years. I did about 10 years within RPO. I worked for Connexa, God rest its soul, and then with IBM after the acquisition by Connexa, and for the last 5 years, I've been working in HR technology. So that's a little bit about me. As I said, nice to meet you guys. So when we start talking about influence, the one thing I'll caveat, I'm not recommending manipulation. And I don't think any of you think that, but for the avoidance of doubt, I'm going to say it. Effective influence is not tricking people. It's not getting them to do things that they don't want to do. It's helping people overcome decision fatigue. It's helping people overcome analysis paralysis. It's making sure that when a hiring manager rocks up to your intake call and they've got a glint in their eye that a new employee is just on the horizon, that all of the barriers and detractors and grit that goes into recruiting doesn't prevent them from having that glint be a reasonable, hopeful anticipation of the bright future with that new hire. Okay? So there's an interesting study I figured I'd start us off with just to put a little context around decision fatigue and why influence is important. You guys may know it. Those of you that have spoken to me before, it's an old story that I tell often. In Stanford, they did a study on decisions to see how people make decisions and what types of influences make decision-making harder. So it goes sort of like this. One day they set up a stand in a grocery store, and that stand had 3 jams, right? So lots of people came over and they wanted to sample the jams, and they liked some of the jams they tasted, and they bought a lot of jam. And it was a very successful day one of the experiment. The next day, they went in and they set up a different stand. But instead of 3 jams, they had 20 jams. Well, much to their surprise, the crowd grew exponentially. The attraction was extreme. People came over, they tasted jams, they talked, they socialized, but nobody bought. They didn't actually sell jam on the day where they had 20 jams out. They drew a crowd, they got a lot of attention, but they didn't get a lot of decisions. Sometimes in recruiting, we can have situations with hiring managers where they end up in the 20 jam stand day. And whether it's because they've got the what's coming next syndrome or aren't ready to decide syndrome, we need to help them through influence get through the analysis paralysis of 20 jams, right? So that's what we're going to talk about. All right. Now, that's awful serious. So let me come back and here. I wrote a short parody for you guys. As I said, I almost had a career in Broadway. You'll find out quickly that's a complete lie. So I think the Recruiter's theme song from Motown is "I Keep Working My Way Back to You, Babe." Right. So I've improved the lyrics, in my opinion, and made them better suited for talent acquisition. So here we go. Let's see if we can pull this off. You ready? I'll keep working my way back to you, babe. Talent, shoot. We're doing that from the top. Buckle up, like I said. I'll keep working my way back to you, babe, with talent that can't hide. Yeah, I'm working my way back to you, babe. I need you to decide. Don't let them get away. This is someone you should say. When you opened your rec with me, you said it was a priority. So I sourced a profile or two, and now I can't get in touch with you. So I'm finding out that this search might not be as important to you. Hey, be that way. You were my guy. I'm moving on without you. All right, that's it. Suffering is over. Your suffering is over. On to a far more serious thing. But that is copywritten, and if you replay that, I'm going to copyright strike you. Song number one. Principle number one. So where did these come from? Over the last 60 years, there's been a lot of research into how people make decisions. And I've pulled out a list that some of you may have seen before. I pulled this list because I think it's good. I also think it's good, not just because it makes sense to me, but that there's a lot of research that goes back into this. So Motown, they anticipated reciprocity long before pop culture listicles and the 6 best ways to influence articles came out. And the 4 tops, they very presciently published, "Reach Out, I'll Be There For You." So "Reach Out, I'll Be There For You" was released by the 4 tops in the summer of 1966 by lead singer Levi Stubbs. It debuted on the charts at #1 on the R&B charts and stayed on those charts for a full 2 weeks until the fall. That same year, 1966, the Gemini 10 set a world altitude record for 474 miles in the sky. The Doors released their debut album, and the Monkees, who remembers the Monkees, premiered on NBC. All right, let's hear a little bit of the 4 tops. We're gonna get these guys going in the background. All right, so reciprocity. Your intuition probably leads you exactly where it should. People feel obligated to repay what has been given to them. So there's an interesting study in particular about tipping behavior in restaurants. And what they wanted to find out is, were they able to influence how much people actually tip, right? And so they ran this experiment where they had waiters come to deliver the check and deliver it with 1 mint, with 2 mints, and then with a flourish in the 3rd. And I'll describe that in a second. Turns out that when you deliver a check with 1 mint, people receive that, they appreciate that. Tips increase by 3%. Now, what happens if you give 2 mints? If you give a bigger gift, tips increase by 14%. Now, what about if you give a mint, and as you're walking away, you pause and you turn around and you say, "You guys have been fantastic guests." You give a sincere compliment. tips go through the roof. They go up 23%. These are the experiences that show up in research that match our everyday lives. It turns out that when you give something first, you tend to get something back. This applies to us in recruiting. What we typically want from hiring managers is we want them to be responsive, right? To be time sensitive. We want them to take feedback and guidance on the market and make reasonable decisions and problem solve. So what we need to do as recruiters is we need to, as Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. One, we need to be the first to give. And two, we need to give something personalized and unexpected. What does that look like? When we get to Q&A, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and some of the examples. But for my own life, when I was running recruiting teams, we would actually make a formal process out of writing up the intake notes, fully editing them, making them presentable, and delivering them to the hiring manager within 24 hours. When we delivered candidates, we would send through critiques of the candidates that reflected the hiring manager's feedback. And finally, we tell the hiring managers how they have influenced our opinions and our thoughts about the search. Are any of these groundbreaking? No. But what we're doing is we're modeling the reciprocity and the willingness to change minds and receive feedback that we want from hiring managers. Principle number 2. I hope you guys can't see this little box that's moving around. I don't know where to put it on my screen. Scarcity. Needle in a Haystack by the Velvets. You want to hear it? I do too. So the Velvets released Needle in a Haystack in 1964 on Motown's VIP Records. Carolyn Arbor, who joined the group in 1961, was in 9th grade. How many of your high school bands took off? My high school band ended in high school, as you can tell from my singing earlier. Needle in a Haystack peaked at number 45 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the middle of 1964. And that same year, the average cost of a new house, what do you think? 1964, what do you think a new house cost? $13,000. $13,000. Most of you have lost that this week in your 401k. Sorry, guys. Sorry, I know it's too soon. Lyndon Johnson in 1964 signed the Civil Rights Act, making it illegal to discriminate against someone based on their race, religion, sex, national origin, or the color of their skin. Very good year. And Elizabeth Taylor married Richard Burton for the first time. So here's where intuition might lead us astray. We tend to think that people want to buy good things, right? That if you communicate the features and benefits, if you communicate the value of something, that it's going to make them want to buy it more. Turns out that that doesn't really show up in the research quite like we think it would. In 2003, when British Airways announced that they were going to end the Concorde flights to London, sales the next day skyrocketed. Prices went from about $2,500, which is preposterous in 2003, but buckle up. Prices went from $2,500 to about $6,000. Nothing changed. The flight didn't get better. The features and benefits weren't communicated more effectively. The only thing that changed was fear of missing out. So what the research tends to show around influencing on scarcity is it's not in our best interest to describe why something is good. It's better to describe why something is rare and what you lose if you miss out on this opportunity. Unique is better than good. What we want from our hiring managers is we want accurate appraisal of talent, right? When we give somebody that has a rare combination of skills that the hiring manager has concocted in their fertile imagination around what the perfect candidate looks like, we need to make sure that they're assessing that individual appropriately. And if they're $4,000 over the pay range, that we are not crying hot alligator tears over the $4,000 because this unicorn just walked into your inbox. We want them to have an understanding of the market, and we want them to have an agreement with us on cost, speed, and quality. What we need to do with our candidates is point out the strengths and what is unique about the candidates. If you don't get this candidate, what are you going to lose, right? I love that this individual has C#. But if this individual has C# and PL SQL, and that combination is unusual, you're going to lose the ability on your team to have somebody that's able to develop effectively on your front end and communicate with your back end developers in language and technical language that they understand, right? Something like that. I'm not a technical recruiter, but it's important that when we're presenting candidates that it's not just selling that this person has amazing experience or they come from a great company, but when you reject this person or if you miss the opportunity to move forward, what are you going to lose? The other thing that we need to do, and here, this may be controversial, if you worked with me, you know I recommend this highly, we need to send through candidates that put a context around our candidates. Forgive the phrasing, I used to call it lambs to slaughter. Many of us work in recruiting environments where we try and send slates, right? So we want to give hiring managers decision opportunity. We want to send them somewhere between 2 and 4 candidates. But when I was having my team put together slates, we would always put a candidate in there that was by design inferior. And the reason that we wanted to put a candidate in that was by design inferior was so that they would understand what they lost if they rejected some of the good candidates. When we're working with hiring managers and we've gotten them to a point of understanding what they'd lose if they reject a candidate, it's also important, and here's where it takes a little bit of courage, to, if the hiring manager is delaying, let them know that you're going to have to leave the candidate out of the process. Tell them that you're happy to go get more candidates, but you need to give feedback to the ones that they've considered and would like to let them know why they're no longer being reviewed for the role. It feels severe. Yes, it brings a crossroads to the conversation, but it helps the hiring manager understand that, one, we can't drag the brand through the mud by providing terrible candidate experiences. And as much as you'd love to run a 4-week search where this candidate is considering whether or not they're going to change healthcare providers and talk to their wife about the new job that they've just accepted for a full month, candidates aren't going to accept that, right? And when they go on Glassdoor and they post those negative reviews about how terrible the candidate experience was, that's not acceptable losses, right? So we can go back and we can look for more candidates, but I'm going to have to explain to these individuals why they're no longer being considered. So what would you like me to tell them? Make sure to bring that to a head. Make sure that the hiring manager understands that there are specific scarce capabilities with these individuals and that we're going to go let them know that they're no longer being considered. That fear of losing what is scarce or that fear of losing what is unique can help break some hiring managers through that analysis paralysis of let's see what's next. Let's run this search for 65 days and see if the unicorn is just around the corner. So you're wondering, why is Super Freak authority? Well, Super Freak is authority less because of Super Freak and more because of Rick James, right? Like if you had to attach a Motown singer to authority, who are you going to pick? You can pick Rick James. Let's hear a little bit. Rick James released Super Freak in 1981 from Motown Hitsville, USA recording studios. Rick James is also known as James Ambrose Johnson Jr. There's a little trivia fact. Put that in your pocket. Super Freak peaked at number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100 and was famously sampled by MC Hammer in 1990 for You Can't Touch This. The same year, 1981, yours truly was born. I know. Gravity. Yearly inflation rate was almost 11%, and the world fell in love with a sexy archaeologist named Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark. So what role does authority play in influencing our hiring managers? Here's an interesting study about how you can get compliance based on perceived authority. Researchers at Berkeley wanted to see if they could get people to give spare change to somebody standing by a parking meter, right? So they sent 2 people out to ask bystanders if they would help somebody pay the parking meter. One person walked out in plain clothes. Think of them like me. Handsome, great beard, hoodie. And they would walk up to somebody and they would say, hey, go give that person 10 cents. They need to pay the parking meter. And then they'd send out a second person. Think of Ryan Leary, right? A bit more respectable, looks good in a suit, And he would go out in a uniform, and he would tell them with a uniform on, hey, go give that person 10 cents. They need to pay the parking meter. Well, unsurprisingly, 42% of people, when they met somebody that told them to give change to an individual by a parking meter with a uniform on, they did it. And when a random guy like me, albeit handsome and with a great beard, told them to do something, there was no perceived authority, right? Just some random guy. It might be homeless. And they wouldn't do it. Authority comes into play when we're making recommendations to our hiring managers. But it's sometimes tricky to leverage authority. So here's the thing about authority. It's not as effective when it's testified to by the individual, right? So I can rock up to a meeting, as I have today, and tell you guys I'm smart and talented and, all those things. And you're rightly skeptical. But if somebody else introduced me and said, Steve is smart and capable as a recruiter and has had a great career in outsourcing, it's going to come across as far more credible. Turns out that it doesn't matter if the person introducing you and attaching your credentials stands to gain something by the recommendation. For example, there was a real estate agency that discovered that if they had receptionists answer the phone and introduce their real estate agent, instead of having the real estate agents introduce and answer themselves, their sales actually went up 25%. Now, obviously, the receptionist has a vested interest in puffing up the real estate agents, but it doesn't matter. When somebody else testifies to our authority, it influences people. So of all the things that I'm going to make suggestions to, I admit this is probably the trickiest. And TA leaders, if you're dialed in, I'd like you to take this one to heart. When it comes to authority, TA leaders need to run PR for the recruiters. Support your recruiters, brag about your recruiters, tell the war stories, put into metrics how talent acquisition is lifting and driving the business forward, and make sure that that gets distributed. Because what do we want to do with our authority? We want our guidance to be trusted. We want, when we push back on hiring managers, to get respect. And we want urgency in decision making, right? We use our authority to drive businesses forward by putting the talent into the roles that are needed to serve the customers and the markets they've chosen. We want to do a good thing. Run that PR. Now, recruiters, you may not be able to get your TA leader to go out and start a PR campaign, although send them a snippet from this webinar and maybe they will. I don't know. Maybe they'll decide not to because I recommended it. What can you do? Although it's true that it is far more effective to have somebody else introduce you, there is still significant movement in compliance and respect of the speaker when you take the time to do a quick introduction of yourself. Think of a couple things that you've accomplished specifically within the department that you're serving and the company that you work in. If you have an industry specialization, don't be shy. If you're a third-party recruiter, you're probably saying, I'm not shy. If you're a corporate recruiter, I just want to offer the encouragement. If there's a moment of self-doubt, swag. Celebrate what you've done. You are driving key talent into these roles. You are solving hire manager problems. Brag about it. That bragging not only feels good, and you deserve it, it helps make the recruiting process go smoother. Consistency. All right. I don't know if you guys know Eddie Kendricks. We're going to listen to a little bit of Eddie Kendricks here. I hadn't heard of Eddie Kendricks before I started doing research for this. His hit is Keep on Tracking is aptly named. It's an 8-minute long song. We're not going to listen to the whole thing. Don't worry. Don't click off because of that. There's lots of other reasons to click off, but not that one. This is Keep on Trucking. Now, it's got one of the best beats. Go ahead. Just in your chair a little bit. Just do it right now. Let yourself. You can see me, but I can't see you. Keep on Trucking has got an amazing vibe. All right. Consistency. Keep on trucking, babe. Let's turn this down just a little bit so you can hear me. Released in August of 1973. You'll remember from the last fact I wasn't born yet. That was 1981. I know you want to remember that. My birthday's in November if you want to send cards. Released in August of 1973 on Motown Records Tamla label. It was Kendrick's first solo hit following his departure from, anybody know? The Temptations. That's right. I didn't know Kendrick, but I do know the Temptations. So 1973, Keep on Truckin' was Kendrick's first hit after leaving the Temptations. It reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and on the R&B singles chart. The same year, 1973, a gallon of gas incidentally cost the same as it does right now. I just got a text message from a friend that they said they filled up their SUV for $11. Turns out that's not a great thing, but it is fun. The same year, 1973, a gallon of gas cost 35 cents. Secretariat won the Triple Crown for the first time since 1948, and the Sears Tower was completed in Chicago. Anybody know what it's called now? Write it into the questions. It's not a question. Standing at 108 floors, 1,729 feet, it was the world's tallest building, and it held that title for, wait for it, 25 years. 25 years. I'm going to ruin the surprise. It's the Willis Tower. The Willis Tower, people. Chicago. Which also has a very interesting little observation thing to go. If you're scared of heights, it's precisely where you should be. All right. Consistency. So here's a trick here. So this is advanced, right? So some of the ones that we've talked about, these are influence 1.0 or influence 101. When you start getting into leveraging consistency, you have to yourself be consistent over time. Because the whole key with consistency is getting people to agree to incrementally more significant commitments. So you can't do it once, right? When it comes to authority and you're doing your pitch and you're swagging a little bit about all the things you've accomplished, boom, you've delivered the message landed. When you're looking to leverage consistency, it does need to be a bit more strategic, right? So here's an example. Researchers in California wanted to figure out if they could get neighborhood homeowners to put a sign in their front yard that said drive safely. Good thing, right? Kids that play. Why wouldn't you want to put a sign in your front yard that says drive safely? Well, the reason you don't want to put a sign in your yard that says drive safely is because it's ugly, right? If you pay to have your lawn look nice, or you put the elbow grease into making sure that grass is green and tidy, the last thing that you want to do is stake down a big old wooden sign that says drive safely. California needed these signs installed, right? So they wouldn't be deterred. Just because the sign is ugly doesn't mean that we're going to give up. For your notes, because this metric probably matters to you, turns out that by just giving people the sign, they were able to get about 17% of people to put the sign in the robe. They wanted to try a different tactic. So what they did is they went back. Instead of asking people to put a sign in their front yard, they asked them to put a sticker in their window. A little drive safely sticker. If you grew up when I did, remember 1981, you might have had some of those fireman logos in your windows. We'll put stickers in our windows. No big deal, right? No big deal. Small commitment. Well, California's goal was not to stop at the small commitment. And when we're recruiting, our goal is not to stop at a small commitment of feedback or showing up to a meeting or being reasonable about assessing the market, right? We ultimately want to drive a hiring decision that drives the businesses forward that we serve. And we want to get the hiring manager the right talent that they're looking for. But that's a big ask, right? That's a complicated decision. So what California did is they said, we're going to start with a small sticker in the window. And then once somebody's already agreed, they've decided, I'm on this team, I support what these guys are doing, they went back and said, all right, guys, now we want to put the sign in your front yard. There's a sticker thing. Yeah, I appreciate that. Now put the sign in your yard, darn it. Well, much to their surprise and pleasure, compliance went up 4 times. They had over 70% of residents putting this ugly, unsightly sign in their front yard, not because all of a sudden the sign became less ugly or people were more persuaded that it made sense. They wanted to be consistent with their other words and actions. The same thing applies to our hiring managers. What do we want them to do? We want them to follow through on promises. We want them to make a selection decision, and we want them to keep the search focused. So what we need to do with them from the very start of the requisition is on purpose give them tasks. You'll notice if you look back on the slides, this is the one slide that on all the possible applications, it's have somebody else do something. The reason it's have somebody else do something on each of these actions is because that's how you seed and leverage consistency. Start small. Ask them to confirm that they've reviewed the email and the search document that you sent through. Very small. It's just an acknowledgement. One might even call that good manners. Begin there. Begin placing in your interactions with hiring managers opportunities for them to be consistent. And then as the search rolls on, you will have increased their desire to be consistent with their words, their partnership, and their cooperation with you. Some other things that you can have them do that are small tasks. They're very achievable, right? They need to be achievable tasks that you give to the hiring managers. Have them send you names of talented people that they've worked with, right? Small thing, it's helpful to you as a recruiter, but really it's not about how it helps you with sourcing. It's about it helps you with establishing a pattern of cooperation and participation with the hiring manager. And then finally, if there is one thing from the consistency slide that I recommend you think about a little bit and consider weaving into the way that you manage your hiring managers, have them describe successful staff they've worked with in the past and identify the development needs they had when they started. Have them understand that some of the people that they have value in, that they have nostalgia for, they appreciate and understand contributed meaningfully to their projects and their teams, and then talk about the way that that individual grew. Because what are we going to need to do when it comes down to selecting one of the final two candidates? The chances that we have the exact perfect fit at exactly the right time, at exactly the right price point is low. It happens, it does. And you sharpshooter recruiters, stop thinking. We're not all like that. Most of us have to persuade. Most of us need to help a hiring manager see the potential as well as the concrete value in somebody. And by beginning to seed in the hiring manager from the start of the search, the understanding that talent develops and that there are concrete advantages to people and then there are opportunities that they possess will help having established that way of thinking before it comes to making a decision so that they feel consistent. They feel like they want to apply the same way of reviewing talent that they have for the people they are affectionate of to the people that they're reviewing with you and that you're recommending to make a decision on. Liking. All right. Junior Walkers and the All-Stars is another one. So when I play this, you'll recognize it. You might not know that you recognize it. This is a really good one. All right, you ready? I'll get turn it up a bit. Here it is. So Junior Walker and the All-Stars. Junior Walker and the All-Stars released in 1969, also on Pamela Motown, and became lead singer Junior Walker's second #1 hit on the R&B charts. Now, I was surprised to find that out, mostly because I didn't know who Junior Walker is, which may cause you guys to judge me. I didn't know who Junior Walker was, but this was his second #1 hit on the R&B charts. What Does It Take to Win Your Love? It remained on the charts for 12 weeks and was voted the top U.S. soul record in 1969. That same year, a Toyota Corolla, 1969, a Toyota Corolla cost $1,950. The first man landed on the moon on the Apollo 11 mission, and Woodstock, you Generation Z people know what that is? Just kidding. Calm down. Just kidding. And Woodstock attracted more than 350,000 rock and roll fans to Bethel, New York. All right, liking. Liking may be home turf for most of us in recruiting, right? Especially if you're third party, especially if you're on the outside selling into these organizations. There's great classics, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Sandler Sales. There's all sorts of things that many of us have probably gone through. I started recruiting at Apex Systems. And Apex Systems, one of the things they did well is they did well with training. And so I went through this when I was 23, running away from law school, running after my wife, Alicia. And it stuck with me. And it showed up here on the top 6 authoritative hits for influencing hiring managers because it works, right? People like to say yes to people that they like, right? That's pretty straightforward. 1, people like people that are similar to them. 2, they like people that pay them compliments, and they like people that cooperate towards shared goals, right? So as all you guys are thinking those very kind things about me and my beard, I like you for that. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for liking my beard. There was a study on what influence does liking have on business deals, though, right? Because most of us have enough friends, and we're probably not joining this webinar to make more. We want to close deals. We want to close requisitions and make placements, right? So the study that they did on liking is, fine enough, liking influences us in our personal lives, but what objectively does it do to closing deals? So there's a study of 2 MBA classes. They took one MBA class and they said the old adage, time is money. Sonny, they probably said it that way. And they said to the other MBA class, hey, get to know each other. Close the deal, but get to know each other. The MBA class that was told time is money because they're steely and sharky, they closed a hell of a lot less deals. They only got agreement on their negotiations 55% of the time. And it turns out the people that gave a hoot about the individuals that they were working with, sincerely, not smarmily, sincerely, expressed interest in the other person's humanity, they gained agreement 90% of the time, and here's the kicker. 90% of the time they gained agreement, and the contracts were worth 80% more. Something that we've all probably heard in recruiting, maybe we can relate to, is it's nice to do well by doing good. I recognize all of us have very different motivations for being in recruiting. For me, making a difference in people's lives is probably the number one motivation. The fact that I can have a great career, do things that are intellectually stimulating, and provide for my family are very, very nice. But if I'm honest, the thing that hooked me was the first time I made a placement was a guy named Sridhar. Sridhar was a COBOL programmer that I placed at Blue Cross in Delaware. After I placed Sridhar, he took me out to lunch with his family, with his wife and his kids, and expressed how grateful he was that we met and that I was able to get him back to work. That's insanely motivating, making a difference in people's lives. So when I'm saying liking, I don't mean stinky, swarmy liking. I mean caring about the people that you're interacting with, the hiring managers you're helping, the businesses you're driving into the markets and the customers they serve, and the people that you're putting to work. It's not just about the transaction. I think we know that. So if you invest the time in getting to know people, you're investing time wisely. Because what do we want from our hiring managers? We want pleasant working relationships, successful negotiations, and closed requisitions. MBA students that spent time getting to know each other closed 90% of their deals, and they were worth 80% more than the MBA students that approached deals with the old adage, time is money, Sonny. So what do we need to do? Invest the time getting to know people, right? It's pretty straightforward. I think here, if you want to apply this, just focus on being human. Just focus on getting to know people, asking them questions, learning what they have an interest in. Second, express on purpose and be intentional about your words, the shared goal that you and that person have. Part of liking is not just people that have similar interests and people that complement you. Part of liking is also being aligned with people. Vocalize to your hiring managers and your candidates the shared objectives that you have. It contributes to liking, and liking contributes to closing twice as many contracts. And finally, acknowledge and verbalize people's accomplishments. Learn about what they've done and then play them back to them. Tell them that they're important and that they're impressive. Sincerely, right? I mean, if I told you that I don't know how to make up a crappy accomplishment, but if I told you something insignificant, don't just flatter me. Flattery is pretty transparent. But if I've done something that impresses you, reflect it back. It's going to make me like you. All right, and finally, we end with the ringer, Marvin Gaye. You ready? So if you guys want to know my number one goal for this webinar is that this is in your head for the rest of the day. Hold on. Let me double down my efforts just to make sure I really invest in my goal. Let's get it on. I don't care how many times you've heard that song. That song is amazing and attached to consensus. Consensus. I'm not going to go too far down that road. I'm going to get myself in trouble. Let's Get It On was recorded in 1970. Actually, I got that wrong. Let's Get It On was started in 1970 and completed 2 years later. Kind of ironic for a song titled Let's Get It On. But anyway, Let's Get It On was started in 1970 and completed in 1972 and was recorded at Hitsville, USA Records. Let's Get It On was Marvin Gaye's 13th studio album and gave Martin his second #1 single. Let's Get It On remained on the charts for how long do you think? Pick a number. 61 weeks. That man was on the charts for over a year. There's a reason why this deserves to be stuck in our heads all day today. That same year, in 1970, a postage stamp cost 6 cents. The Boeing 747 made its first commercial flight operated by Pan Am from New York to London, carrying 332 excited, high-flying air travelers. And the EPA launched with its first Earth Day. Consensus. What is consensus? All right. So there's 2 techniques that are trickier to use. This is the second technique that is trickier to use. The reason the consensus is trickier to use is it needs to be specific. People don't care what people do in general. People do care what people like them do. All of the effective consensus cuts along those lines. This is going to be the first one where we actually pull in data as the key driver for leveraging consensus and influence with our hiring managers. Let's take a look at a study first, though. Hotels wanted to figure out how they were going to decrease their water costs and environmental impact. I think we all probably agree with that. Turns out most people agree with that. But we need them to not just agree, we need them to reuse their towels, right? So hotels started putting a sign in their bathrooms, please reuse towels and linens. It worked, but not much. The sign, please reuse towels and linens, resulted in compliance about 37% of the time. That's better than nothing, but that's just over a third. So some really smart psychologists and behavioral scientists started figuring out, is there a way for us to leverage consensus to get better compliance on people reusing their towels and linens? We think we can do better than 37%. Well, they had another fact in their pocket. What that fact was that if somebody stays in a hotel for 4 nights, 75% of the time, they at some point reuse a towel. They weren't lying when they put this next thing out in front of their guests. They were leveraging data and evidence they had that related to the guests that they wanted to influence, and they told them that. And then they asked for something in return. So they changed their sign. They moved away from the noble cause of protect the environment, and they got to consensus. And their signs now said 75% of our guests reuse our towels. Please consider doing so. This increased compliance 26% and took them over the 50% mark. They wanted to try one more. They wanted to see if they could get one layer closer to the actual guest. And so they tried a second sign. And that second sign said 75% of guests that stay in this room reuse their towels. Towel reuse increased another 33%. We're not at 100, but we're really close. They're now at over 80% compliance with people reusing their towels, not by telling them that it's a good thing to do. We all agree with that. But in order to change behavior, we need something spikier than just a good thing. The people that were writing the hotel signs leveraged consensus, and they helped the people in those bathrooms and in those hotel rooms, those guests who they wanted to change the behavior of, to identify with another group of people and told them about that group of people. Turns out that we often look to the behavior of others in similar situations when we're trying to figure out how we should behave. What does that mean for us in recruiting? Let's talk first about what we want. We want decisions, we want feedback, and we want our SLAs to be good, right? We want to fill jobs, but we also want to fill jobs, if we're third party, in a way that's commercially compelling. And if we're in-house, we want our metrics to look strong. Our department is probably measured on time to fill and quality of hire and interview to hire ratio. All of these lovely metrics. We want crisp decisions, and we want to leverage consensus with our hiring managers to help drive them to the behaviors that lead to successful searches. So what we need to do during our intake calls, during our update calls, and when we're talking with our hiring managers, communicate in metrics. Tie those metrics to the departments that they work in, to the companies that you're employed by, and to the industries that they're a part of. Let them know that when hiring managers have made a hiring choice within the first 2 to 3 candidates, that it's not just hiring managers, that it's hiring managers in their departments have been able to select within the first 2 to 3 candidates. Can we set that goal together? When you're talking about the cost of certain skill sets, we're not looking at just the cost of a programmer. We're looking at the cost of a programmer within the pharmaceutical industry. We're looking at a cost of a programmer on the West Coast. Tie these data points down to aspects the hiring manager can relate to. The more specific we can make our data, and you'll know from the hotel example, don't make the data up. I don't think any of you are hearing that, but I'll say it for the avoidance of doubt. Don't make the data up. But do find the data that supports the behaviors that you're looking to reinforce, and then attach that data to your hiring manager. Show up to your meetings with the data in hand and know it pat so that you can talk about it naturally. Confirm with the hiring managers that they believe the data relates to them, and communicate the talent acquisition SLAs and the track record that you guys have been running at, if they're good track records. Look, if your time to fill is 85 days and you're looking to pull that down, if you work for some specialty pharmaceutical, and that's good, I'm not trying to throw stones at you, but for most of us corporate recruiters, 85 days is not our target. So if that's your number, set that one aside. But if you've got an SLA that has been achieved and you are on a strong run around time to fill or driving hiring manager decision, or here's a good one, if you're getting feedback from hiring managers within 24 hours, how about telling the hiring manager that most of the hiring managers you work with give feedback within 24 hours? What do you want to shoot for? Help them align and identify with the data that you're sharing, and then use that data to drive the behavior that you're looking to establish, not for your personal gain, but so that you can fill the role, support the business that you're employed by, help the companies accomplish the mission serving the markets that they've decided to be in, and put people to work. And that, my friends, concludes Motown's 6 authoritative hits on influencing hiring managers. I appreciate you. It is 2:57. We don't have a lot of time for Q&A, which was shamelessly by design. Don't probe any deeper. I gave you everything I've got. If you missed it when I was signing on, I will reiterate, this is my bear market hair. This is going to go down until the Dow goes up. So if you want to stop looking at your stock portfolio, just tune into my Facebook. When this gets shaved off, you can look. And if you don't look until then, you'll probably have less torture. On a different note, I know that a lot of us are facing some challenging times. I'm sorry, and I hope that we could have a little bit of fun today. We're going to get through this. It's really scary and crazy. but we will come out on the other end of this. For those of you that are working at home, I'll tell you a personal story from my life. If you're married, if you got other people in the house, put a little extra compassion on. My wife sent me a text message Sunday evening in a way that she doesn't normally, and it really just signaled to me that, you know, we're all facing some pressure right now, so support one another. What she had told me is she needed me to help more, which isn't the best reflection on me, but I'll tell you anyway. And yeah, it's a time where we have an opportunity to be a bit more compassionate, a bit more supportive, and I'll share the optimism that I have that obviously we're going to get through this. There are silver linings. If you've got kids, for many of them, this is like an awesome snow day. My son, Squidworth or whatever he said he was, he just thinks this is the most exciting adventure ever. So I hope you guys had a little bit of fun. I hope that Let's Get It On is stuck in your head for the rest of the day. Hold on, let's try and reinforce that learning outcome. Here we go. You ready? Let's get it on. All right. And thank you for tuning in. It's been a lot of fun.
Hey, Steve.
Back to you, Ashley. Yeah.
I just want to come back in here. I think Ryan is still locked out, so I've stayed quiet just in case he was there. But this was amazing. Thank you so much. We've got fantastic feedback coming in and a couple of questions. Do you
Good.
have time to just hang out for 2 minutes?
No. What are you, nuts? I'm a busy man.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, everyone.
I'm kidding.
I apologize.
I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding.
So
don't you start turning this webinar serious in the 11th hour.
This was so much fun. I've had Let's Get It On stuck in my head now for 2 weeks since we started putting this together. So so lots and lots and lots of thank yous coming in. I just want you to know. And Rashmi, I'm sorry, terrible. I can't read the small font. Says thank you so much. You are so funny, and you absolutely know how to get anybody. She said she is actually IRL LOL right now. So
yes.
And what's your birthday?
Rashmi, you are a quick study because track number 5 has you written all over it. Look, you throw me a compliment. I appreciate that. My birthday is November 8th, 1981. The world was blessed with this webinar. Today's webinar is a part of a long string of events beginning November 8th, 1981. Also, point of interest, I'm a millennial, but I refer to myself as the grandfather of millennials because I'm from the exennial generation. But yeah, that's my birthday.
Thank you. So everyone sends Steve lots of questionable birthday wishes in November.
Send me some earworms.
There you go. There you go. I hear that you can just order confetti and send it to somebody in an envelope. So I think that's what Steve wants for his birthday.
If I get a single glitter bomb, we're done.
Do it. Tony has a question for you. He says, as I pre-screen candidates, I pre-screen hiring managers in all fairness. I want to know if the environment is a good match for the candidate. Not all hiring managers are good managers. So I think that's a question, maybe a statement.
Yeah. So, let me think about that for a second. So first, the straightforward response is I agree 100%. We didn't talk about it a lot on this webinar. You may have seen it in some of the advertising that we put out there. As lighthearted as all of this is and should stay, I really, really believe that recruiters need to protect their time, and recruiters need to be selective, especially if you're a third-party recruiter. And if you're an in-house recruiter, be tough on those managers that are boneheads. Really be tough on them. We are not customer service professionals, in my humble opinion. I'm not here to say, thank you, may I have another? I'm not here to meet every whim of your imagination. I am here to drive a business forward. I used to provide recruiting services to public companies when I was at Connection and then bought by IBM. And one of the things I used to say to the VPs of TA that were my customers is that it's important to me that in TA, we understand that we don't serve the hiring managers. We serve the shareholders. Our goal is to drive business value, and we do that by providing one of the most important resources a business needs to serve the markets it's chosen and the shareholders that have invested their capital to drive it forward. We put the right people into the right jobs. So I'll just say, I agree with you 100%, Tony. and I'll leave it at that. But yeah, preach on.
So much. And then we have one more. You done? You ready for it?
Ready. Just put it down the middle for
Ready.
me.
Okay.
Let me hit this.
So Marcus wants to see the last page of track one. And Marcus, you will get this slide deck in an email. So keep your
Yep.
eye out for that. You'll be able to go through it and learn on your own time.
So here, let's go with Marcus. So track one is reciprocity. We want to give what we get. So I will tell you guys a little bit more about this. I don't know if it's helpful. Marcus, I'll assume maybe looking at this means that a second of additional dialogue. I hope to goodness some of the recruiters that I've worked with over the years are dialed on, because this will make them smile. One of the things that I preach is being methodical, right? And being methodical, not because the method is right, but because the method starts to establish a contract between you and the hiring manager. Timeliness on the replies to the emails, expectations of timeliness from them, standards of communication and detailed feedback, the aesthetics of your documents, right? And this may sound out there. If it's not, God bless you. But even when it comes to formatting your documents, making them attractive, making them digestible, no garbage PowerPoints if you can avoid it. These behaviors that you role model, right? God did get it right. Be the change that you want to see in the world. When we role model these behaviors, you don't magically become the boss of the hiring manager, and they don't mysteriously lose their free will. And that's obvious. But what you do become is you become an individual that's able to leverage reciprocity, and people want to give back what they got. And so when you role model that discipline, professionalism, and that commitment to quality documentation, it's going to set a tone for your search that you can leverage later on when you need to extract those same commitments to decision-making and timeliness from your hiring managers in order to close that requisition.
You. Awesome. So Marcus, if you have any additional questions or anything, just send them over. Do you have time for another question, Steve? They're going to we're going to keep you here. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you're not allowed
I'm
to
turning
leave.
the music back on then.
Do it. Okay, on reciprocity.
Here we go.
Sometimes teams are great in being thankful and nice, but you want to reduce the other person's email inflow. How can you balance that? That's from Rima.
People are being thankful and nice. So I guess is the problem that there's sort of like an artificial, I'm adding that word, but the way that I think about it is sort of like an artificial courtesy where like every email is acknowledged. So this
She
may
says
be
it's
counterintuitive.
genuine.
It's genuine. All right. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I try not. So this is from the desk of Steve. This is the way that I behave. I try and not participate in that. There's a couple of things that I think get difficult to manage, and one of them is the volume of emails that we're trying to navigate when keeping heads or tails of what we've got to do and what are mission critical communications. And so when it comes to those kind of excessive thank yous, I simply don't participate in them. However, I want to clarify that I think the word that they had used was kindness. The word that I tend to use is gratitude. I think expressing gratitude on a team and to coworkers in specific and meaningful ways is probably one of the most important things that you can do to drive teamwork and productivity out of your staff. It turns out that a sense of gratitude drives employee engagement. Employee engagement doesn't measure much, but it does measure this. It measures discretionary effort. As a team leader and as a colleague, I've always been mindful that when I express gratitude to my colleagues, I'm helping drive engagement, and that engagement helps our collective good be more valuable because our discretionary effort increases. So although I don't participate in the bandying back and forth of lots of thank yous, I do go out of my way when we're starting team calls or when I'm having conversations with people one-on-one to express sincere gratitude for who they are, what they do, and some of the accomplishments that they've recently put into the bank, so that they know for sure that their work is recognized and valuable. So when it comes to email, I try and avoid it. Email's a pet peeve of mine. I don't read half of the ones that I get. I don't think that's virtuous, but it is reality. And so I just try not to have gratitude and kindness go through email channels.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we're good. Are you
Awesome.
ready to get back to the quarantine world? This has been a crazy week. He's lost in his tunes, folks.
I'm gonna fade to black on Marvin Gaye. No, I'm good. I appreciate it. This was my first Facebook Live. If anybody saw it out there, like I said at the start, judge graciously. And have a really great Tuesday. Stay safe, stay sane, support one another, and thank you for being amazing recruiters. I appreciate you guys.
Thanks, everyone. See you again. Bye, Steve. Thanks.
See ya.
Have a great day.